Boo! I know. I got you pretty good. But collect yourself, because we are here to do a review thing for a brand new game, Ghostwire Tokyo. Anyway, Ghostwire Tokyo is a horror action adventure game set in, you guessed it, Tokyo. The game was published by Bethesda and developed by Tango Gameworks, who are known for the Evil Within series, which I've heard from a very reliable source are pretty great. And guess what? This game is pretty awesome too. I honestly love it. It's by no means perfect, and there's definitely some stuff that could be improved upon in the future games, but I overall found it to be a fantastic experience. So let's just get right into it. First thing I feel like I should mention is that this game is definitely not a horror game. Don't get me wrong, it's very heavily influenced by horror elements and has some really creepy moments at times, but if you're looking for something to really scare you, this just ain't it. At the end of the day, this is an action-adventure game with horror elements, and honestly, that's fine. It works really well in the game. Just, go in with the proper expectations. Alright, now we can get into the good stuff. There is a lot to love about this game. One of the biggest things that drew my attention to the game was the visuals. This game looks so good. And I don't mean graphically. Well, I mean graphics are great and all, but that's not what I'm talking about. The game takes place in creepy dystopian-esque Tokyo, which has now been filled with monsters and nightmares, and this is the part of the game that really shines. The enemy designs are super cool, and there is this constant eerie feeling when exploring the deserted streets of Tokyo. The magic the main character uses to combat said enemies is visually stunning. Like, it's this combination of mystical and digital that feels so unique. Fighting off these terrifying beasties is always a frenzy of lights and colors that looks great on the next-gen hardware. Combine that with the chilling enemies you're actually defending yourself against, called visitors, and you have something special. There are also some non-aggressive supernatural beings called yokai that populate the world, and again, all look great and showcase how fascinating Japanese lore can be. I think this game made me realize how much I love the mythology of Japan. So many cool creatures and ghosties, and the game puts a spotlight on a ton of them. The world of this game is what drew me into it, and it's the biggest thing that kept me into it throughout the entire experience. The story does contribute to this, but honestly the story is a little thin and surprisingly short. Ghostwire is an open world game, so there's plenty of side missions and activities to do, and if you do none of them, then you could finish the story in like 8 hours probably, if that. The meat of this game comes from the exploration of the map and the completion of side content. The story itself is just fine. It's not bad by any means, but it's not the most compelling or original you've ever seen. I didn't really have a problem with that, mostly because I like the main characters quite a bit. KK and Akito have some really good back and forth, and the core of their relationship is a really interesting dynamic. The game starts and you get right into it. All the people of Tokyo are basically raptured and turned into spirits, leaving just a pile of clothes where they were once standing. KK, who recently died and became a wraith, needs a body to possess so he can continue his mission. He manages to pick Akito, who he thinks is dead, but surprise, surprise, he's not. KK can't override Akito's consciousness, so instead, the two team up to save Akito's sister and take down the big bad. The things that make the story stand out from other games are the things I mentioned earlier. The world of the game and the visuals make the story more compelling than it would be normally. And again, the story isn't bad. It serves its purpose and gives the players objectives to complete. Most of the objectives of the story involve cleansing Torii gates so you can access more of the map, but, still. The story does have its high points, however, most of which come in the ending, which, without spoiling anything, I will say is the strongest part of the story. I really liked the ending. It was well done, with the exception of some of the emotional beats they tried to hit not feeling completely earned. Some more time spent developing and establishing those relationships would have put some extra weight behind those emotional gut punches it delivers. That's actually the thing this game struggles with the most. It has good ideas and good elements, but not all of them are fully realized. The side missions and activities are a great example of this. The side missions vary from super interesting and unique to typical and boring. You'll have creepy missions where you hunt down some terrifying monster, and then later you'll do bare bones, go to point A and fight some guy type missions. When the side missions are good, they're fantastic, but not all of them are like that. My personal favorite side mission has you chasing a painting of a dragon as it moves along the sidewalk to various dens. It looks so cool. It comes back to what I said earlier about the strongest elements of the game being the supernatural aspects of the world. Even some of the most mundane side missions are boosted by the neat bit of Japanese mythology tied into them. Like this one that features a type of yokai I'm not even going to pretend to be able to pronounce.
66尾.
This thing is so cool / creepy to me. I love it. The yokai are another aspect of this game that could use some work. They're cool and all really interesting, but the actual gameplay element that comes with them is very repetitive. Throughout the game, you'll find yokai scattered around the map, and if you do a little activity with them, you get something that helps you upgrade your abilities. It's fun at first, but the problem is that once you've done the first mission for each yokai, then you've basically done every mission for that yokai. There are some surface level changes, but they get repetitive real quick. It also doesn't help that several of the yokai missions just involve following it around until you can absorb it. Plus, there's so much repeated dialogue in every yokai encounter, and that's just a pet peeve of mine in video games. It's petty, I know. Speaking of repetitive, I have seen some criticism from this game about the repetitive nature of the combat. I didn't really have that issue. I enjoyed the combat throughout my entire playthrough, from start to finish. That being said, I could potentially see how some would feel that way. The combat is really straightforward. You have 3 different types of attacks based on different elements. Your wind attack is the one you'll probably use the most. It's the fastest but does the least damage. You have the water attack, which is kind of like the shotgun of elemental magic. It has a wider spread and does more damage, but has less range. The final element is fire, and is by far the strongest. It does the most damage, but you have significantly less of it. Each of these 3 elements has a charged attack along with a regular one. On top of your Naruto hand attacks, you can also use talisman in battle that each have different effects. The most useful one for me was the one that stuns enemies. You can also block to reduce damage and even parry enemies if you do it quick enough. Plus, you get a bow and arrow that is good for ranged attacks and stealthing about. The combat could be considered simple, and it kinda is, but I think it works really well. The game isn't really hard, but mixing up your different attacks and abilities to deal with a large amount of enemies is really fun, and can be genuinely challenging at times. There's also certain points in the game where KK and Akito will be separated from each other, so you lose all of the special abilities. Well, not all of, most of the special abilities. And some enemies can even rip KK out of you in the middle of combat. And it didn't happen to me very often, but when it did, it was stressful. If the game was longer, then I might have gotten to a point where I found the combat repetitive and got bored with it, but I'm about 25 hours in and still not tired of it. I really enjoy trying to optimize each enemy encounter so I can take them out as quickly and efficiently as possible. Plus, I don't know if I mentioned already, but the enemies are really cool. Okay, so I've talked a lot about what I did like about this game, and overall I really like it. It is probably my favorite of the year. That being said, it does have some issues and areas that could use some improvements. Overall, I think the first person perspective works really well for the gameplay, and it puts you right there in the combat, makes it feel more personal, and the game wouldn't be as interesting without it. However, it does impede on the exploration of Tokyo. At least to me. The climbing can be awkward, and it's not always clear if you're climbing on something meant to be climbed on. Also, I'm pretty sure that the climbing animation just wouldn't happen sometimes, which was weird. To be fair, I was playing it before the day 1 patch, so that could be something that's fixed by now. There is just a lot of jank that comes with this part of the game, based on my experience. I love the verticality of the map, and the fact that you can climb and jump buildings. It felt like a whole nother layer to the exploration, but it could have been cleaner in terms of gameplay and control. Especially since 80% of the game is spent exploring Tokyo, which is another thing the game could maybe improve on. I think the environments are great and Tokyo looks gorgeous. I loved exploring this map and completing all the little side quests and activities. I did all of them because I enjoyed the world so much. That being said, it's not going to be for everyone. If you don't like open world games, then this probably isn't going to be for you. Ghostwire kind of falls in the trap a lot of open world games do, where it gives you a lot to do, but half of it is just the same thing over and over again without really switching things up. While I enjoyed the game and setting enough to do all the side stuff, I can completely understand if you don't. Like I said earlier, most of the side stuff is repetitive and just not that interesting outside of the supernatural whatnot. A lot of it's just following something around until it stops, or just doing a series of battles with waves of enemies. I like the combat quite a lot, as I've mentioned several times, so this didn't really bother me, but it could definitely get old fast for some. There's also the spirits of the citizens of Tokyo that you can collect and use to gain experience. It makes sense within the story, and it's a great way to level up. The things are everywhere on the map. I swear there are hundreds of these little spirit globs around, and after a while collecting them could definitely become tedious. I have stopped going out of my way to collect them and just kind of get them when they're along my path. You also don't have to collect them, but it's definitely incentivized. Now let's wrap this up. Overall, I think the game is really good. I personally loved it. It's definitely not terrible, and at worst, it's mediocre. I don't think it's fair to call it that. I didn't really experience any bugs outside of the missing climbing animation. There's definitely nothing game breaking to it, at least that I experienced. It's always a gamble with AAA games in regards to how buggy they are and if they, actually work. But this game does. That's pretty cool. There are cosmetics that you unlock in game. That's always nice, since that should be the default, but isn't for some reason. Yeah, anywho, if the idea of the supernatural world and the first-person combat doesn't grab you, then you'll probably get tired of this game pretty quickly. There are a lot of good ideas here, and for the first game in a new IP, it's a great start. I just think they need to go a little bit further with the idea and really develop the world and the gameplay. There's so much room for improvement, and I hope we get a sequel so maybe we can get said improvement. If I had to reduce the game to a numerical score, since that seems to be the standard for reviews for some reason, I would probably say the game is an 8 to an 8.5 for me. Alright, that's the end of this here review for this here game. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was clear and concise and made sense. Do check the game out if you're interested, because it is really good. I do recommend it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out all the rest of the stuff here on Maxx. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you whenever I do next.